You did not eat more than usual last week. You did not exercise less than the week before. But you had a brutal week at work. Deadlines piling up, a difficult conversation with your manager, barely sleeping, mind racing at 2 a.m. And somehow your belly looks bigger. You probably told yourself it is just bloating, just water retention. It will pass. But here is what is actually happening. Cortisol, the hormone your body releases under stress, has receptor sites on visceral fat cells at 3 times the density of fat anywhere else on your body. That means when cortisol spikes, your belly fat receives the strongest storage signal in your entire body. Not your thighs, not your arms, your belly specifically. Stress is not just making you feel bad, it is directly instructing your fat cells to grow. A study published in Psychosomatic Medicine measured visceral fat in women with similar total body fat percentages. The women with higher cortisol patterns had significantly more visceral fat than the women with lower cortisol patterns. Same total fat, completely different distribution. Cortisol was the deciding variable. But here is the part nobody talks about. It is not the stress itself that decides how much belly fat you accumulate. It is the 7 habits you fall into when stress arrives. Some of those habits belong to people who seem to stay calm and lean no matter what life throws at them. Others are the ones almost everyone defaults to when overwhelmed, the ones that quietly amplify cortisol instead of reducing it. Stay with me, because habit number 4 is one most people reach for instinctively when they feel stressed. The brain actually craves it under cortisol, and it is one of the most direct pathways to visceral fat accumulation that exists. Drop a comment right now before we start. What is the first thing you do when you feel stressed during the day? I want to know where most people watching this are actually starting from. Here is the biology most people never get taught clearly. Cortisol is not just a general stress signal. It has a specific job. When your brain perceives a threat, cortisol mobilizes energy and directs your body to store reserves near your core organs, where fuel can be accessed quickly. That is why visceral fat, the fat wrapped around your liver, kidneys, and intestines, is cortisol's preferred storage location. 3 times more cortisol receptors than anywhere else. The problem is that your body cannot distinguish between a genuine physical threat and a stressful email. Both produce the same cortisol response. Both send the same storage signal to your belly fat. And here is what makes this so difficult to address with diet and exercise alone. You can eat perfectly and train consistently. But if cortisol is chronically elevated, the fat storage signal running in the background overrides much of what you are doing right. 7 habits decide whether your cortisol rises and stays elevated, or rises and comes back down. Habit number 1, slow breathing when stress starts climbing. This is what people who handle stress well tend to do naturally, not when they are already overwhelmed, when they first feel the pressure beginning to build. Here is the mechanism behind it. Your breathing pattern directly controls your autonomic nervous system. When you breathe slowly, specifically when your exhale is longer than your inhale, you activate the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is essentially the brake pedal on your cortisol response. When it fires, it signals your adrenal glands to slow cortisol production. A study published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience found that just 5 minutes of slow breathing with a 4-second inhale and 6-second exhale produced measurable reductions in cortisol and significant improvements in heart rate variability. 5 minutes before the stress fully takes hold. This is not meditation. You do not need silence or a special environment. You can do it at your desk, in your car, in a bathroom stall if that is the only private space available. The fix is catching stress early, before you reach for your phone, before you reach for food, before cortisol has time to fully mobilize. 4 seconds in through your nose, 6 seconds out through your mouth. 10 rounds. That is the entire intervention. Habit number 2, opening your phone when you feel overwhelmed. This is the reflex almost everyone has and almost nobody questions. You feel anxious, stressed, or overwhelmed. Your hand moves to your phone before you have consciously decided to pick it up. You tell yourself you are just taking a break, just distracting yourself for a few minutes. But here is what is actually happening. Social media feeds and news platforms are architecturally designed to produce continuous microstimulation. Every scroll produces unpredictable new content. Some of those triggers mild anxiety, social comparison, or low-level outrage. Each of those micro responses produces a small cortisol spike. When you are already in a stressed state and you add 30 minutes of social media scrolling, you are not reducing cortisol. You are piling additional small spikes on top of an already elevated baseline. A study in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology found that reducing social media use to 30 minutes per day reduced anxiety, depression, and loneliness significantly after just 3 weeks. The mechanism is simple. Your nervous system cannot downregulate while it is being continuously stimulated. The phone feels like a break because it distracts you from the specific stressor. But cortisol does not care about distraction. It responds to stimulation level. And social media keeps stimulation high. When stress starts building, phone down first. Replace it with breathing from habit 1, a short walk, or simply looking out a window without consuming any content. Habit number 3, going outside into nature. For 10 to 15 minutes. This is another habit that naturally calm people seem to gravitate toward, without calling it a stress management strategy. You notice it in the people around you who seem to handle pressure well. They tend to step outside more. A short walk around the building, sitting on a bench in a nearby park, standing in a garden for a few minutes. The research behind why this works is more specific than most people realize. A series of Japanese studies on what they call Shinrin-yoku, which translates roughly as forest bathing, measured cortisol levels before and after time spent in natural environments, compared to urban environments. A study published in Environmental Health and Preventive Medicine found that 15 minutes in a natural setting reduced cortisol by 12.4%, lowered blood pressure, and reduced heart rate compared to the same amount of time spent in an urban environment. And the effect was not limited to forests. Urban parks with trees and natural light produced similar results. The mechanism involves multiple simultaneous inputs: natural light, the sound of wind or birds, the visual complexity of organic shapes rather than straight architectural lines. All of these activate the parasympathetic nervous system through pathways that are distinct from breathing exercises or social connection. The fix is building in a 10 to 15 minute outside window when stress is high. No phone, no podcast, no content of any kind, just the sensory environment of being outdoors. Habit number 4, eating sweet or high carbohydrate food when stressed. This is the habit that cortisol itself creates, which is what makes it so difficult to resist. Your body craves high sugar and high fat foods specifically under stress, because cortisol is designed to mobilize quick energy to deal with the perceived threat. Sugar is the fastest energy source available, so cortisol drives you toward it biologically. The craving is not weakness. It is your stress response doing exactly what it was built to do. But here is what happens when you eat sugar or refined carbs in a state of high cortisol. Cortisol temporarily increases insulin resistance. Your cells become less responsive to insulin while cortisol is elevated. That means the same amount of sugar eaten during a stressful moment causes a higher insulin spike than the same food eaten in a calm state. Your body releases more insulin to try to clear the same glucose. More insulin during a state of high cortisol creates one of the most direct pathways to visceral fat storage that exists. A study published in Psychoneuroendocrinology confirmed this specifically. Stress-induced eating of high-calorie comfort foods combined with elevated cortisol produced significantly faster visceral fat accumulation compared to eating the same foods in a non-stress state. The fix is not willpower over the craving. It is redirecting the craving to something that does not combine with cortisol to produce the same fat storage outcome. Protein and healthy fat satisfy the eating urge without the insulin spike that cortisol amplifies. Eggs, cheese, nuts, a protein shake. None of these trigger the cortisol-insulin combination that drives visceral fat directly. Keep something high protein within reach during high stress periods, so the default option is not sugar. Habit number 5, genuine social connection after a stressful day. This is a habit that naturally stress-resilient people tend to prioritize without framing it as health behavior. After a difficult day, they call a friend. They have dinner with family and actually talk. They spend real time with someone they feel safe around. Not texting, not commenting on someone's post. Actual voice-to-voice or face-to-face connection. Here is why the distinction matters biologically. Real-time social connection with someone you trust activates oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone. Oxytocin has a direct inhibitory effect on the HPA axis, the system responsible for cortisol production. When oxytocin rises, cortisol production is actively suppressed. A study published in Psychoneuroendocrinology measured cortisol recovery after a stressful task in women who either talked directly with a close friend, were left alone, or exchanged text messages. The direct conversation group showed significantly faster cortisol recovery than both other groups. Texting produced almost no cortisol reduction compared to being alone. The medium matters. Your nervous system is wired to respond to real human presence and real human voice, not digital approximations of it. After a particularly stressful day, prioritizing one genuine conversation, even a 10-minute phone call with someone you trust, produces measurable cortisol reduction that nothing else on this list fully replicates. Habit number 6, replaying stressful events before sleep. This is the mistake almost everyone makes on their worst nights. You lie down, the lights go off, and your brain starts running highlights of everything that went wrong today. The conversation that did not go well, the deadline coming tomorrow, the thing someone said that you cannot stop thinking about. This is called rumination, and it is one of the most effective ways to keep cortisol elevated during the exact hours it needs to be at its lowest. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a stress event that is happening now and one you are mentally replaying. The cortisol response fires in both cases. Cortisol elevated at night suppresses growth hormone release during deep sleep. Growth hormone is your body's primary overnight fat-burning signal. No growth hormone means no meaningful overnight fat burning regardless of what you ate or how you trained that day. A study published in Clinical Psychology Review identified rumination as the single strongest predictor of chronic cortisol elevation and linked it directly to poor sleep quality and metabolic dysfunction over time. The Fix is a brain dump journal before bed. Not problem solving, not planning, not reviewing your day. Just writing down everything currently occupying your active mental space. Your brain replays things it has not yet recorded or resolved. When you write them down, your brain receives a signal that the information has been stored and does not need to be held in active memory. 10 minutes of unstructured writing before bed. Whatever's in your head, onto a page. Cortisol has room to fall. Growth hormone has room to rise. Overnight fat burning can actually happen. Habit number 7, setting 3 priorities before opening your phone in the morning. This is the final habit, and it sets the cortisol tone for the entire day that follows. People who handle stress well tend to begin their day with at least a brief moment of knowing what actually matters before the outside world starts placing demands on their attention. Here is the biology behind why this matters. Cortisol naturally peaks in the first 30 minutes after you wake up. This is the cortisol awakening response, and it is designed to be helpful. It gives you the energy and focus to start your day. But if in those first 30 minutes, your nervous system is immediately flooded with notifications, news, and other people's urgencies, cortisol spikes beyond its natural design and sets a higher baseline for the rest of the day. A high baseline cortisol day means a higher fat storage signal running all day long. A study published in the journal Stress found that people who began their day with a clear sense of their own priorities showed significantly lower cortisol reactivity to stressors throughout the day, compared to people who started their mornings reactively. The fix is three things. Before you open your phone in the morning, identify the three most important things you need to accomplish today. Not your full task list, not everything demanding your attention, just three. When your brain knows what actually matters, it is less reactive to everything that feels urgent but is not. Less cortisol reactivity throughout the day means less belly fat storage signal running in the background for 8 hours. Here is the complete picture of what your stress habits are doing to your belly fat. Habit 1. What resilient people do. Slow breathing at the first sign of stress activates the vagus nerve and pulls cortisol back down within minutes. Habit 2. The reflex most people have. Reaching for your phone when stressed keeps stimulation high and cortisol elevated instead of letting it fall. Habit 3. What resilient people do. 15 minutes outside in any natural setting reduces cortisol by over 12% through sensory pathways no breathing exercise can replicate. Habit 4. The one cortisol itself creates. Eating sugar or refined carbs under stress combines with cortisol to produce visceral fat accumulation faster than almost any other scenario. Habit 5. What resilient people do. Real voice-to-voice or face-to-face connection with someone you trust activates oxytocin and directly suppresses cortisol production. Habit 6. The mistake most people make at night. Replaying stressful events before sleep keeps cortisol elevated during the hours when growth hormone needs to peak for overnight fat burning. Habit 7. What resilient people do. Knowing your three priorities before opening your phone each morning reduces cortisol reactivity for the entire day that follows. Here is what I want you to understand before you close this video. Belly fat from stress is not a willpower problem. It is not a discipline problem. It is a cortisol problem. And cortisol is not something you can out-exercise or out-diet when it is chronically elevated. The 5 minutes after stress begins is when everything is decided. That is when cortisol is either amplified by the habits most people have or interrupted by the habits that quietly keep belly fat from accumulating in the first place. You do not need to eliminate stress. Nobody can do that. You just need to change what you do in those 5 minutes. Try one of these habits the next time you feel stressed. Just one. Then come back and tell me which one you tried and what shifted. Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. If this changed how you understand the connection between stress and belly fat, subscribe to What Science Reveals. Real science explained clearly every single week. And if you want to see how your morning habits connect to everything we covered today, that video is right here. See you in the next one.